Hello, and welcome to Revive and Rise. I'm your host, Melody Parrish, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. So, for the month of June, we're going to continue talking about suicide because it's a very important topic that needs so much exposure, and there's so many things to touch on. And today we have a very special guest with us that's joining us, Jason Stokes. He's a filmmaker and an author and so many other things. But Jason, I want to welcome you to the show and thank you so much for stopping by.
Absolutely. Um, and just what you said, I think that this is it's a very important topic. I think it's important that people understand that they're not the only ones going through these feelings that can come up, and that they can come at all points of life. So I thank you for that. Thank you for being here and for talking with us and putting some exposure on this and maybe helping some people work through things or at least feel a little bit less alone.
Yeah, yeah, that's our goal. So, you're going to share your story with us about your suicidal experiences today.
I am, and I'm going to try to encapsulate it in an easy to understand package. Because there's a lot there, like with a lot of us. Um, I think these things, well, depression certainly is a thing. So sometimes there is a chemical imbalance, sometimes there's an illness or a disability or what have you that can lead to these thoughts. And so that can be a struggle for people who deal with that throughout their lives. Um, on the other hand, there's also people who get to that point through experience, through trauma, and through repeated exposures. And it leads you to a place of desperation. And so, like most of those stories, there are a lot of elements. Most of us want to be here. I think it's pretty much the human goal to stay alive for as long as possible. Um, and to be a part of that life, to be an active participant for as long as humanly possible. So to get our minds to a place where it feels like it would be better to stop is not a short road. And so there are a lot of factors that go into that. It has a lot to do with caregiving. It has a lot to do with support groups. It has a lot to do with mental health awareness, how to manage your mental health and what your particular I'll say issues, but that's not even right because we're all just different. And so understanding how to live in our bodies and to have the minds that we have that are all unique is important. And that there's emotional self-awareness that goes with that. And we just happen to live in a society that doesn't prioritize that kind of awareness. So for me, that was a very common early factor. I don't want to say victim survivor, I think is the right word in this particular case. I am a survivor of extreme child abuse. So myself started very early. From when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, I think is when it was like ramping up to the worst, but it was present the whole time. It was present for my brother, who was older than I am by several years. So he had it, and then I inherited it. And the basics of that are very simple. We had, violence. We had sexual violence. We had hoarding, which became a huge problem down the line. We had drug addictions. We had sexual abuse. We had physical abuse. We had verbal abuse. We had emotional abuse and manipulation and this is just from our parents. Like this is just, in the home. So, and that doesn't include the things that happen just as a part of being a child, right? So going to school and the way that our town was set up. And actually, you and I are from the same town. Now, I'll reveal that
Yes.
if you don't mind. And so you may remember that around 99, I believe it was, we desegregated like for the first time. And that sounds absurd to some people, and it is absurd. It never should have taken that long,
Right.
but it added a lot of social turmoil to to our lives as children. I was 12 years old when all of a sudden these two cultures came together and they were not properly prepared to come together. So that caused even more issues for us. And so you had class problems, you had race problems, you had home problems. And then just to add on to that mix, I'm exceptionally neurodivergent. I think it's a nice way to put it. So me and my brother both are on the spectrum, autism spectrum. He leans way, he's fine with me saying all of this, by the way. He's very open. I wouldn't reveal other people's information. He leans way more autistic than I do, and I lean way more ADHD side. But we both share characteristics of both. Have OCD, which has been an issue since I was a small child, which was more than likely. There is a mental component, a genetic component to that, but it was also exacerbated by the environment that we grew up in, which made that such an obstacle in life. We obviously have PTSD, complex PTSD from repeated exposure to these experiences over years. I was 15 when I left home. When we finally escaped, which means he was 19. So that's a long time to endure these behaviors that were constant, but that were ever changing. And so we never really knew how to deal with these problems. And then anxiety. No, like if you make it through this world, I think without developing anxiety, I really don't know how you do it. But good for you. So I have extreme anxiety as well. So generalized anxiety disorder. I'm just making sure I got all the letters because there's a whole alphabet in there. And then also being a queer person, a non-binary person in the South in the 90s and trying to understand not being necessarily heterosexual and not being necessarily male or female and not really understanding what that means and having a lack of resources. These were the experiences that came together to reach the first crisis point. So there were two major crisis points in my life. The first one was at 15. So this was right before we decided to leave. And honestly, I wish we had decided to leave sooner. But as a child, you have these concepts of how the world is supposed to work. And that is exactly why it was so difficult to live in that time, because you seek, especially autistic people, neurodivergence of all kind, you seek structure. You are appalled by lying and disingenuous people. And there's a word that I'm looking for, but any kind of deception is like a personal affront. And the same with OCD. So we seek structure. And so to be confronted with these family figures who, because of the segregation, this is why this is important, we were pulled from school. So now after sixth grade, I'm taken out of school. I'm already struggling. Kids have a way of being insightful, and so they could tell that things at home were not normal for us. And instead of being empathetic, they're often very aggressive. Any weakness is attacked, and we with hoarders, like I said, and it wasn't just items. They hoarded like trash. So the smell in our home was strong, and you carry that with you. There's no way you don't. So, when you go to school and you're obviously poor and you're dirty because your parents aren't taking care of you, and then you smell because your home was filled with garbage and other things. They didn't like to take the dogs out, things like that. They notice. And so that became very hard. So that became a very confrontational experience on a daily basis. There were a lot of fights on a daily basis. So you learn to be very guarded and aggressive and have a very short temper, and to take that, and then all of a sudden you no longer have these outside relationships. So you're in an abusive home, you're in an abusive situation. And addendum, because I forgot, because at the time I wasn't aware, I had also been sexually abused as a child. I don't know the extent because I blocked it out. And that's why at that time I didn't know it, but I did know it on a deeper level. So that was there as well. So you're trying to figure out all these feelings, that you're having. And there's just no way a child is equipped to do that. And then you don't have your parental figure. You don't have your guidance. And so they essentially locked us away. Very conservative, very, Republican, good. Voting for those guys. Don't need no foreigners coming here taking our work. If you Black people or you're one of the good ones, that kind of stuff. Is very toxic for a young mind to deal with. And we very much did not agree with them on every front. My brother is one of the sweetest, most empathetic people I've ever known in my life.
Yes.
And I follow very, very close to that as well. So it hurt. It physically hurt us. To want to see the good in the world and to be constantly given this in response. So when I was about 15 years old, we were getting pretty close to the end of, being able to deal with that. And our mother had gotten on drugs pretty bad. She'd become addicted to painkillers from an accident that we had, a car accident that we had, which is really when things turned from what was already bad. Because you were talking about a home full of domestic violence where, my earliest memories of childhood is listening to my mother be beaten. And then she in turn turned that into manipulating us and keeping us too close and all of that went with it. And then when we moved to a different home and it looked like things were going to kind of improve, bigger home, lots of windows, they hadn't had a chance to destroy it yet and clutter it. And we were like feeling optimistic. And then things just started to fall down again. And I noticed that she was drifting into harder things, harder drugs. So we had some strong confrontations about that started to turn into physical violence. So I was like, I don't think I can deal with that. And here I go taking the floor from you. But I'll try to wrap up this first one though. The point being is that was like a lot, right? So I know even for like somebody listening to this for the first time, you're like, what in the world, man? That's like a lot of things to try to shoehorn in. And I feel like, that gets the gist of, where we were. And so they started abandoning us more. And people who were around at the time remember that we lost power because they wouldn't pay the bills, or they would give us like a week's worth of food and be gone for a month. And I remember us like having candles and listening to my little portable CD player because it's all we had in the dark. And then we would walk to the library every day as a form of giving us a safe place to be, which is why you should support your libraries always. They matter more than you can imagine. It's the only place in a lot of communities where people are allowed to exist without the expectation of spending money, without the expectation of any kind of monetary or usefulness, in quotes. People can just be in a comfortable environment and you can access knowledge, which saved our lives because we taught ourselves to code and we studied things that we needed to know. And like I was able to finish an education that way. So they matter. So as all of these moments are starting to kind of blend together and come together, I'm struggling with becoming a teenager. Becoming a teenager under these circumstances, I have limited access to outside, so I'm not having healthy relationships. And on top of that, I'm trying to struggle with being, what am I? Am I gay? I don't think I'm gay. I'm definitely not straight. Okay. And the non-binary mindset of, well, I don't feel like I'm male, right? But I don't feel like I'm female either. I don't feel like I want to be. And that in the late 90s, that was really the one that pushed it, because it's further isolating you from a society that you already feel on the fringe of.
Right.
And I had seen a few shows because that's how we got information back then. Like, you had the internet if you could get it, but I'm not looking that kind of stuff up in the library. I don't want to get caught, and then they think I'm a pervert or a freak or something like that. It's a different era. So I just had information from HBO,
Mm.
And all of that started to bubble up, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I had no idea how to confront this part. And I'm just like, well, this is even worse. Like, life is unbearable at this moment. And now I might be looking at a future where I'm like the Phantom of the Opera, I got to like hide my face and live in shadows because I can't keep living like this. I'm not happy. And I don't remember the exact statistic, but I think it is that it's like 41% is the suicide rate for unsupported trans youth.
Oh.
And I believe it because I turned so hateful towards myself because it began to feel like I was the problem. And those feelings had started like 10, 11 years old. We were they were very religious. And I remember like praying for a change. I was like, I can't, this isn't me. This isn't the right me. So praying for that. And it's like, there's got to be a way, can we intercede here and like and fix things? And obviously, obviously that didn't work out. And so I would try to block it out for a while, and that doesn't work. You can't ignore facts. You can't ignore that your brain doesn't function the way that other people do. And then homophobia in the late 90s was rampant. It was you were punchline, you were a joke, and trans people, even worse, were considered to just be sick. You were some kind of monster. And so I didn't want that. And I didn't want to live like that. From that vantage point, on that day, I was sitting alone in my room. And I knew that because of my father, my mother kept a gun under her pillow. She always kept a gun under her pillow. And I thought about it many days. That's like, it's enough. From that moment, the best I'd ever known, bad. Mm. And the future looked worse. It looked like there was no peaceful way to live. And so I decided that was going to be the day. And the only thing that saved my life, I got up, I walked down the hall, I went into that room, and I went under the pillow, and it was gone. The gun was gone that day. And it was the only day that I'm aware of that it was missing. So I can only assume that she went to do something really stupid that day, as we both did, apparently, and then taken it with her. The feeling that comes with being ready to leave think the only thing worse is realizing that you can't. And that was a tough moment. It was a really, I was like, some part inside was, I guess, relieved, because you didn't have to make the choice. So I was scared. But now what? So then you have to face it. And so that was the first time. That was the first time, was realizing I'm going to have to face this. And that's a lot to do when you're that young.
Yeah. And when you're struggling as much, it's like what you're talking about is such a complex thing with so much going on. And then you being a teenager, so you've got so many of the hormones going on and the growth, and not just that, but it sounds like you're beginning to try to understand and grasp the idea that this is not normal, that something's wrong here, and I don't know what it is. And not just that, but alone, but then trying to come up with ideas of figuring out yourself. It
Yeah.
just it sounds like such a struggle, Jason. What can you talk about, like you were saying that you're ready to go, and that's the thing, and you finally decided, that this is the thing, this is what's going to take this pain away, because this is the only thing that can take this pain away. And then being so disappointed when you can't do that, but yet being relieved at the same time. And those two things can exist at the same time, being relieved and yet disappointed about the same um, circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. It is an understanding, maybe not fully conscious in the moment, but an understanding that there is another option, though it's narrow, or it'll appear so, and it's not. It's really not. It's just hard when you're in that moment, because so many things have to go wrong to get you there. But it only takes one right to set it back. Um, Sometimes doing nothing is the answer. And we have to allow these emotions that seem so big. They're like, they feel like waves, crashing over you, or it feels like an encroaching darkness, or it feels like whatever it is that you envision. Um, we always see ourselves at the middle of it. And in my experience, I'm not going to speak for the entire world, but in my experience, it always feels like some kind of external force. We want thrive in our world, but it seems like the circumstances will not allow for it. And sometimes that answer is a new environment. Sometimes that answer is a new approach. And sometimes that answer is to sit with what we're running from. I thoroughly believe that a large majority of suicides are fear of facing the truth. And when we understand that you can't avoid the truth forever, we get terrified and we take a path out rather than have to deal with it. And that is a valid but sad and not unnecessary response. We can, with the proper support, we can face that. But a lot of people feel like we have to do it alone, or don't know where those resources are and don't know how to ask for help. And sometimes we don't even know what it is. We just know it's so incredibly wrong. With my repressed memories, I would get panic attacks, but I wouldn't understand why. I would catch a scent, and I'm sometimes just hanging out with friends, just walking through the mall or just like sitting on a couch somewhere, a perfectly normal day, and I would catch just this glimpse of something, and my security system would go into lockdown and it would freak out. And I would have these moments of just absolute sheer terror and panic. Why? Why? What is going on in my brain that just won't? Like, it wants me to run screaming right now. That's illogical. So maybe we could figure this out. And it took literally decades to get to a point where I could sit down with it and say, okay, you're trying to tell me something. What do you need me to know? But some people don't feel like you have that time, and that fear can come from a lot of places. And sometimes you react with depression, and sometimes you react with self-loathing, which was an issue. And why would you seek to protect yourself when you've turned the blame back on yourself sometimes as a coping mechanism, or sometimes as like a manipulation, a result of being maltreated, that you start to believe that you're the problem when you're really not. So why would you have self-preservation if you've managed to convince yourself you're the problem? So these are things that only qualified therapists can help with, but they can help. And I will say for sure that on both times, it felt like the end of the world, and it felt like there was no possible light both times. And it's not like I haven't thought about it other times, but there were just the two moments where I was like ready. And I was wrong twice. It was absolutely wrong. There was hope. And the things that have happened in the years between here and there, what an absolute crime to have missed those moments. So, yeah, I wouldn't give that up for anything. And I'm really glad that life turned the way it did.
Yeah. And well, I mean, we all are definitely glad that you're still here and you're still helping so many people in so many different ways. But you're talking about so many different things. It's so hard to know where to go from here. But you talk about as a child, all the experiences, and I'm sure no one knew those things about you when you were a child, that you were going through all of those things when you interacted with teachers, and like you said, you went to the library and just other individuals throughout life. And yes, we did come from a small southern closed-minded town that would just make you feel so alone in several of the different situations that you have explained that you were in. But with all those things and people interacting with you but not fully understanding, can you speak to the people that are listening to us, like what they could do possibly in those circumstances, just to make things a little easier for people, to be a little kinder, and to help people in those situations however you may feel you can?
Yes, absolutely, I can. And I think this has been remarked on quite a few times in public whenever we lose somebody who's socially visible, and like a celebrity or somebody in the public spotlight. You're shocked more often than not. And it's because people who are struggling develop, especially neurodivergence, it's like one of our superpowers. They develop an ability to mask. They can overcompensate in such a way that if you're not looking, you won't notice. And I understand a mindset that allows this to happen. You'll say, yeah, whatever like thing just happened to a friend or an acquaintance or a person you know, and you go, yeah, but they're fine. That's just that's Jim. That's Susan. Um, they can handle it. They can't by themselves. None of us can. It's very important to remember that though we all have different strengths and we all have different abilities, we're all human. And as such, we are basically all the same. Um, we feel the same emotions. We experience the same amount of grief and loss and hope and despair. We experience all of the same emotions. We just process them differently and we show them differently. So if you have a friend who appears to just always have it together and never seems affected, even when things happen, like with the loss of a parent or huge disappointments in life or struggling through financial hardship, especially those things where our society teaches us to mind our business. Maybe don't. It never hurts to say, you may have this under control, but I'm here if you don't. You don't have to, for lack of a better word, accuse somebody because that can build defenses, can kick in there. It's just, there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm here if you ever need it. And then listen to the response you get. Because when I was on the verge of these moments, I was the most energetic, adversarial would be a really good word. I seemed very in charge of myself, and I seemed very in charge of my attitude, and I seemed very opinionated, strong-willed, and probably the least likely. I don't think anybody that I encountered on a daily basis would have suspected because I never showed the weakness. That was a coping mechanism. It was intentional because I knew how dangerous it was to be that compromised emotionally and to let anyone see it. So it was very, very important to keep it hidden. And sometimes we do it instinctually. Animals do it too. When you feel wounded, you hide that. You go someplace where they can't see you. And we do that emotionally. So for your friends and your family, even ones that you have no concerns about, there's nothing at all wrong with, and we should, as a society, love one another openly and without shame and say, hey, I care about you. Maybe there's nothing going on in your life right now. Maybe you're fine, and let's share that. But being that open door at all times is the way that we support each other so that when something does happen, they know, like, I can go here and I'll be safe. And it'll probably come from a lot of us as a joke. Mm-hmm. Jokes are the temperance that allows us to approach difficult subjects. So if you have a friend who makes a lot of jokes, seem kind of odd. I don't think, maybe they're not, maybe they are weird. Some of us are just weird. But maybe they're trying to have a bigger conversation. In the 90s, early 2000s, there were gay jokes where it was huge. And then we figured out that a lot of those people were actually just closeted and they were trying to be like, ha ha, what if I want,
Yeah.
And that can be the same with I'm having trouble at home. It could come out in a way that sounds like it's humorous so that so you can laugh it off and you don't have to confront it head on. But with our friends, it's important that we listen to the subtext. And if somebody seems like that's a little bit odd, well, it doesn't hurt to take an extra second and be like, is there something that you would like to talk about? Yeah. And be friendly. People will only come around when they're ready. I think it's just being available. If there had been a phone call to make, I would have made it, but it didn't feel like there was a place to go.
Right.
It would be that.
Yeah, and that's so important. What you're saying is talking about people being there. And I feel like when you're in that space that you're thinking that you're wanting to take your life, you feel so alone and isolated. And I think I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like from those perspectives and from that way of looking at your life, you just kind of go into a downward spiral of things. You're alone. Nobody understands. There's no way out. Where do I go? All those kinds of things. And you're talking about being a child and trying to grapple with all these things. I just recently learned that between the ages of 12 and 36, that statistically suicide is the number one cause of death. Number one. And in that young, I mean, I feel like it just shows that in that young space, when there's so many things happening, you just don't know what to do, grappling with all these tough, difficult emotions and situations. And like you said, you need somebody. And even if you do feel like you're all alone, one wonderful resource, even if you're not thinking about suicide, even if you just want to talk to someone, is the suicide hotline, the 988.
100%.
Yeah, there's somebody there all the time, and they'll just talk to you.
And there are texting options.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there's email options. Now we live in a connected community, so there's forums. There are places to go. You don't even have to say who you are. You don't need to know that. There are places to get support everywhere, and we should. If you feel those feelings coming, if you think that it might be, and we always want to think it's not us. It's not us. We're not. I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. But if your mind makes you question for even a second, then just get that resource someplace handy. Maybe you never need it, but having it on your phone or having it like bookmarked or having the number saved, it might save you. It might save a friend. You'll have it, and then you don't have to worry about people asking. You're like, hey, I keep this in case somebody needs it. That somebody might be you. You never know.
Exactly. Yes.
100%. Yeah. So, and then like from those moments, I think you were just saying about the statistics. It's important to remember that our brains are still developing. If I'm correct, and check your information, no matter who tells it to you. But I believe something along the lines of 25 years old is your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brains that controls who we are, really. It is not completely formed until your mid-20s. So these traumas that we're intaking and these good things that we're intaking and this whole life that we're living is constantly informing and affecting and literally shaping our brain in a massive way until we're what most of us would consider adult. We've probably been on our own for years by the time that our brains kind of settle and gel. And another very important thing to remember is that our brains are not permanent. They are plastic. Not hard plastic, but like plasticity. They can change, and they do change through your entire life. Your brain is constantly growing in certain areas and pulling away from other areas and trying to adapt to the life that you're living. So once we remove ourselves from toxic situations, people always say that depression changes the brain. And they're like, oh no, my brain's damaged. Yes, trauma is a form of brain damage in that it makes it function less well. but you can recover. Your brain can grow for your entire life and change. So the way that you're wired to deal with situations today will not be the way that you're wired to deal with situations tomorrow if you remove yourself from the situations and find a better environment. You find a better place to be, even if it's therapy once a month, if it's focusing on a hobby. I mean, it can be very small things. These influence the way that your brain works, and it strengthens those pathways that give you resilience and give you hope. And sometimes medication's required. In my case, I got treated for ADHD finally at 40. Yay me. And along with it came a very welcome antidepressant, because dopamine, which is the chemical I'm short on, also influences mood. So not only am I more focused now, but hey, side effect, actually happy, and that's something I couldn't have imagined in those early years. So we'll touch on the second one. So after we moved out, this is a series of unfortunate events. Is what it feels like sometimes, and I try not to depress people with these stories. So we moved out finally. We got it. We were like, we're done. We're not going to live like this. And we took it upon ourselves to escape. Best decision we ever made. Still glad I did it. I wouldn't change it. Unfortunately, for a teenager living on their own, the world is a dangerous place. And I made it about 6 months, living with some friends in a crowded apartment, bunch of dudes, and we had a 2-bedroom, and we had 6 people living there, probably 3 or 4 who visited daily. It was crowded. But it wasn't, we were happy, like there's such a difference between being around people you like and being in a clean, welcoming environment, as opposed to being alone in a very dark and scary environment. So we were happy. We were all escaping something. And we came together and supported each other through that. And I had a friend from New Orleans who brought some weed up and gave it to me as a gift. And of course, I mean, we're teenagers. We were smoking pot like constantly. But unfortunately, this one had been laced. So this one had PCP in it. There are 2 bad side effects to PCP. First one is I wasn't aware it was in there. The shot was a lot to deal with because it is a very strong drug. And we had, because it was a gift, me and my girlfriend at the time, we like popped it, right? We're like, no, we have plenty of that trash weed that you guys bought. This is good stuff. And it was a gift to us. So take a hit, and then we're going to like mostly keep it ourselves. Whatever. Those are the rules. He didn't pay for it. Anyway, so the shot from it was a lot, but also it is a very strong dissociative drug. And the little known side effect is that if you have repressed trauma, it makes it impossible for your brain to repress the trauma. It brings it all back at once. So let's look at 16 years of everything that had already driven me to that point once, but it all came back at one time, like in a single moment. It all just comes rushing back. But while it's rushing back, your brain is on this weird psychedelic style trip. Like everything looked like it was in a fisheye lens, and like people were so far away, and I was time traveling. Basically, I was blacking out and like waking up mid-sentence. And I did that for 3 days. Like it took a really, really long time. And so some people are like, well, people's experiences are different. Well, mine was very, very strong. had a very strong negative reaction, and it was exacerbated by the repressed trauma. But I was like living on my own, which is the worst time to go through something like this, and like touching walls and couldn't feel them. And I was looking at like the ceiling and I was like waiting for it to disappear. Like I expected rooms to just disappear. Like I was just in a really weird mind space. And scared, terrified, because I didn't understand what was happening. And eventually I remember laying in the front yard, like in the grass, of this like 2-room, like this duplex that my brother and I were staying in together. We had left the apartment. So what happened was that we were all in the apartment, and then I went to live with my girlfriend for like a little while they were getting things straight, and then I moved back in with my brother. But in that interim, that's when the drugs happened. And I remember just laying in the ground, like laying on face down in the grass and like mumbling. I was saying go boom over and over again. My brain had just quit. It was like that's it. So like a really strong mental breakdown. After that, that caused the OCD to come back so hard because your brain again struggles for structure, it struggles for reason, it struggles for meaning, and it could not find meaning in any of this. It could not understand why. Where are all these emotions coming from? Because so many were repressed. And I became extremely OCD at that point. Terrified to touch, terrified to eat. I was 158 pounds, which at 6'1" is small. I was not functional. I was not able to take care of myself. So people would bring food. They would, whatever my phobias were, I became terrified of mad cow because I just happened to see a news program while in the state, and you're very suggestive. Suggestible. I don't know. One of those words. You're open to ideas. And so then I became terrified that I was going to get mad cow disease. And so I shunned meat. I wouldn't touch meat or anything that touched meat. And that's how it feels inside. Your brain's like, you can't do it. And this might have touched it. And they might have touched it. And it might be here. And this is the OCD. The phobia side of OCD. OCD also has a very strong ritualistic side of repetitive activities. And I had many, many, many obsessive repetitive activities to do with hands and to do with holding yourself a certain way or making noises like clicks and grunts and sniffs, things like that. And I crumbled as a human and was terrified. Eventually, I moved back home. They had moved to yet another house. So we were on the clean stage. We were on the up, like the apex, going downhill. And my brother moved back too. He lived in an apartment out back. And I was so bad. Like I was scared to swallow. So that was the one that came up. And so that I would just keep my mouth shut, but I would be carrying around like spit, like in my mouth until I couldn't anymore. And then I would spit it out somewhere. I did lines. There were like lines everywhere. It's like Monk, the TV show Monk. It's like that, but like cranked up, right? So that to 11. On top of being terrified and like anguish from all of these mental things that were going on, these memories, this hatred. I'm now living back with my family that I hate. And she was on heroin at the time. Well, synthetic heroin, but because it was legal. It was a prescription that she had tricked somebody into giving her because she's manipulative. And so she was losing her mind sometimes and doing the craziest shit. And then Chris is, again, autistic, but not diagnosed. So he's increasingly childlike as he grows. He didn't progress past a certain age emotionally, but he also had his own trauma that was like tamping that down. He's doing a lot better now. I'm like super proud of him now. But we were both dealing with things. And so he's in this little tiny apartment, and we don't have any food again, and all this shit's going on, and the house is starting to close in and get more and more cluttered. And I just remember that during that time, I couldn't get out of bed. I remember the Titans came on, and like my brain was like, you can get up once this movie ends. But then I didn't do the right thing while I was watching it. And it's like, no, you have to watch it again because it came on again. But this time I couldn't look at the screen. So I'm just looking at the floor. And I'm just like, think of a person sitting in one spot for 3 hours, paralyzed, and it's just closing in and closing in. And I was shutting down. And I would do that all the time. Sometimes I would stand for 8 or 10 hours in one spot. And then I would just slowly like close my eyes and look down and close up. And then it was like I was just trying to die. And I always felt like this voice, this external voice, was like controlling me and telling me what I could do, what I couldn't do. And it was really looking for order. I understand through years of therapy, many years of therapy. This is 25 years ago. And I talked about it yesterday. Some of the stuff that I'm still dealing with. And my brain was looking for order because everything that I knew was bad. Like it was based on a strange framework that didn't work. And also these new experiences from drugs. And it was trying to find something that made sense. So I clung heavily to ethics. I clung heavily to empathy. I tried to build a new life around that, but it was every second of every day felt like being attacked from inside. So this is a whole new different thing that I wasn't prepared for. The life before with the previous attempt was confusion and anger and emotions, very free flowing. But now I was locked in and I felt caged. And it would threaten me with whatever your worst, and it was me, but I would threaten myself with whatever the worst thing I could think of was. And so I did watch a lot of TV, but it's like, oh, planes are going to crash. People you love are going to die. Things that are impossible because of you, because you did the wrong thing. And so like, even picking up a spoon or something off the counter, it's like, don't do that. Like, why can't I just eat? Why can't I just have this? And that's a lot. Yeah. I ended up going to Georgia. I went to school down there. I went to Job Corps, which was hell because I went to a very ghetto place with like razor wire on the fences, pointed in to keep us in. They weren't worried about people. They weren't worried about anybody getting to us. They just wanted to keep everybody out. So I lived in it was a converted Air Force base, and it was the most ghetto, scariest place in the world that I had lived in at that moment. It was just a new trauma. I'm trying to escape, and I'm weird in a place full of people who don't tolerate weird. And luckily I was scary. So it's better than getting picked on. People who were just avoidant because they were scared that I was like a school shooter kind of thing. When really I was just scared. I was just really, really scared. And I hated every moment of that. And I got married after I left there. Mistake. I got divorced very shortly after, moved back home. It means it's definitely in fast forward. But still dealing with these and slowly learning to function as a human and hide them more than anything. I internalized them so I would adjust. I'd be like, look, I can't not swallow because people are noticing plus it smells. I need an alternative. So instead of that, I switched to like a guttural, like a click, like a throat click, and that was more socially acceptable. And so it was just tics, and I managed it and managed it and managed it for years and years and years until it was just internal. So now I look normal, but I'm not normal. I'm far from normal. I'm still having every one of those thoughts. I'm still having every one of those screaming anxieties inside. I'm still terrified to exist. And I think I was 26, 26 or 27 on my second attempt. So let's say that's 10 years. 10 years of that. I had moved many times, relationships fell apart because I would never tell people what was going on. And if I did, they got scared. Nobody wants to be around the broken person, you know. My brother knew, and he was the kindest person, and he saved my life. So, I was very lucky to have him there for those first few years. So anyways, I moved, I got a job up in Virginia. I lived in Virginia for a while. I came back. And all the time it wasn't getting better. I was just getting better at hiding it. And my mind had started to warp things to fears that were impossible to prove so that I couldn't fight back. So every time I fought back, it just got better. It challenged me. What it wanted, and I didn't figure this out until I was 39 years old, it wanted me to take responsibility for my life. My brain was telling me, you can't hide from yourself. So every time I tried to counter it, and every time I tried to fight back, it would say, I'm stronger than you. And it would it would just pick. I mean, when you have access to yourself, you can't beat yourself. Okay. You know what you're afraid of. You can't win that fight. And it was trying to tell me, you can't win this fight because you're fighting the wrong thing. You're fighting yourself. You need to take responsibility for your life. You need to live even though it's scary. You need to live because it's scary, right? Life is, what makes it wonderful is it's unpredictable. Yes. So my brain was trying to tell me that, but I wasn't getting the message. And so I just kept fighting and fighting and fighting and digging deeper until I was in a relationship, and it was the best relationship I'd ever had. I was so happy on the surface. I was like, this is everything I've ever wanted. With this other person, I thought they were just wonderful, and we were so much alike, which is a red flag. And I was like, this is everything, but I'm gonna fuck it up. Pardon my language. Because I can't get myself together. Mm-hmm. And I got even madder with myself, and it was like, you have to. And it got worse because that's the wrong thing to do. I became so aggressive against this inner voice, and I was like, you have to stop. And it was, no, instead, I'm just going to tear you down until you realize what you have to do here. And so these fears became paranoia, and they became overwhelming until I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was just going crazy. And she worked at night. So I was alone at night. Well, she had swing shifts, but so I was alone at night often. And that one, I had a friend who I would call once in a while, and I would just say, I've convinced myself of something bad, which meant that I had like an OCD moment where my brain was like, this terrible thing's going to happen. And then I wasn't able to do the ritual, whatever it is it wanted me to do. I wasn't able to accomplish it because I was asking myself to do things that were impossible, stretch the limits of human endurance mentally and physically. Like go 3 days without eating, that's one thing, but like hold your thoughts in a certain way. Don't think about the red elephant kind of thing. It's the first thing you do. And I knew it was impossible, but I kept trying. And so when I slipped or made a mistake, it was like, oh, you fucked up now. And so now this thing that you're scared of is true. It's happened, and you have to give up the thing. It was always, you have to give up the thing you love to keep this going. So if you love this relationship, if you're happy here, if it's bringing you happiness, that's what's being attacked. So it's thinking of ways to make me believe that I had to give it up. Or in extreme cases, if I wouldn't, that it already had, And so it was messing with my mind and making me think things that weren't true. And things were happening that weren't true. And convincing me that I was completely insane. Convincing me that I was living a life that I wasn't living, that things that I was seeing weren't really happening, like truly psychotic, like stuff. But I knew logically it wasn't real. I just couldn't prove it wasn't real. So I called that friend and I said, I can't do this anymore. They talked for a while. And so, yeah, they taught me for a little bit, like this always goes away. We've gone out to dinner and let you come down and let you start putting the pieces because it's a manic thing. And once you come down from your mania, which is not the proper term, I don't think, maybe it is, I don't know, but I'm no disrespect because I've lived with bipolar people. It's a special hell that they go through, but it's similar. So it was like, they were like, when you come down from this and when you start thinking logically, you're going to be able to pick your way back out. And you're going to be able to feel leveled off until you get another attack. My battery warning came on. Okay. So they were like, we can get through this, and I thought through them for a little while. And as I was talking to them, it just kept eating at it and it just kept scratching away at it. And I was like, I can't get myself back out of this every time I do. It's like being in a finger trap or like an animal in a cage. And like the more I struggle with this, the more it hurts. And I don't see a way out. And so this is after my daughter had been born. I think she was 2012. So she was 5. It's like 4 or 5 years old. And the relationship with her mother was violent. It was angry. We really hated each other. And I had left because I didn't want that for her. I refused to let her grow up the way I did. But because of finding work in another state and because we couldn't stand to be around each other, the mother, I love my daughter to death. She graduated last week. She's incredible. I didn't see her a lot. I was really sad about it. So everything was just boiling. Like I knew I was about to lose this relationship. I knew it wasn't going to work out. And I knew I couldn't see my kid. And I was like, I'm losing my mind. I'm going insane. If I have to do this every couple of weeks or every couple of days for the rest of my life, I don't want to be a part of it. So my dad had given me a gun, which I still have, as a gift. It's one of the few things he ever gave me because our relationship was understandably not great. But had healed in the later years before he died. We were starting to figure it out. And the difference between my dad and my mother is my dad, he never apologized, but he seemed sorry. And my mother didn't. She will not take responsibility for what she did. And so I was able to repair. It wasn't great. I've hugged my dad once in my life, and I told him I love you once in my life. He didn't say that. That's where we were. But anyways, he had given me this gun as like a gift, as a birthday gift. And that meant something. But it also meant I had it. So I went outside and I sat in my car and I took that with me because I didn't want to make a mess inside. I think I'd been arguing with the girlfriend that night, which is what kicks it off. So these were always emotional reactions. Whenever I was highly emotional, my the system would start to get shaky, right? Because these are not real rules. These are things you've made up to survive. And when I get angry, or if I got really agitated, or really scared, and I would start to question. And so this framework was very shaky. And so we'd been arguing, and I had one of these attacks, and I was trying to hold on. Because LCD is all about control. And I felt like I was losing control. And it had been so many of these in a row, and I was just like, I don't want to do it. And so I did. I sat out that car, and I put the gun under my chin, and I just sat there. And the only thing that stopped it was thinking about my kid. We had arranged a room for her. Like we were going to give her her own bedroom in the house with this person that I was seeing, and she was going to come be like a part of my life again. It was funny because this was back in the town that you and I grew up in. I had moved back willingly. I was like, why am I in the place that causes me the most pain? Because this person that I like lives here. And I was just sitting there, and I was just like, they're going to come find this. That's going to be really, really traumatic for them. I'm never get to see my kid grow up, which is part of it. But the most important part is, what is that going to do to a child mentally? What is that going to do to them? I didn't want to. Because our family had passed down so much trauma that do that again seemed unfair, and cruel to her. So not as selfless as it sounds, because I wanted to live. I wanted a good life. I just couldn't see it. I just had to make a different choice. And so I did. So I just went back inside, and decided to try again. And it worked. That's the most important thing I want to put. It didn't work immediately. We broke up. It was terrible. And it took me years to truly get over that relationship. That moment stuck with me. But once I decided that it wasn't the way, kind of put it aside. I'm like, okay, it's not what you're going to do. You're going to do it the hard way. But it took a long time. And I met my wife actually very shortly after that. We had actually already been talking. And that's the thing. You never know what's already there. So we were already friends. And we had stopped talking during that period where I was in this relationship, because we were both very moral people. And no, it was at a distance, but I think we knew that we didn't want to do anything inappropriate. Right. And so having relationships it was a very good relationship, and we really enjoyed talking to each other. And so it just felt inappropriate. And so I didn't. But shortly after that, 5 or 6 months after that relationship ended, July. So 6. 6 months after that relationship ended, I ended up like meeting her like in person, because it's a whole long story I won't share here, but like we met and we really liked each other. And we allowed that to grow. and I moved and I went out to Phoenix. And I remember saying when I got there, I was like, things are kind of messed up, but I just need some time to figure it out. And she said, okay, that, since you asked before, was the difference. I said, I need a place to be where I can sort this out because I have no stability. And she said, okay, you're safe. Figure it out. And it's a lie if I said it's been easy because I still masked and I still hid and I still acted like nothing was wrong. And I did everything but outright lie about what was going on in my head. I didn't tell her everything that was going on, which was wrong. It was a mistake. I should have. It wasn't wrong because I was self-preservation, but should have. But eventually, in that safe space, it came out. And I told her a lot of things that I told you today, and started to explain what was going on. And I got in therapy 3 years ago, almost 4. And I can say that I am legitimately happy more often than not. Those things will go away. You deal with them. I've learned to manage a lot of it, and I've learned to approach those traumas with compassion towards myself, some towards the perpetrators because they're human. Even though they did terrible things, they're on their path, and it happened to intersect with mine. But those moments of crisis when it felt like there was no way forward, the future that I live today, where I've been to like 15 or 16 countries, I've traveled the world, I've published books, I've made movies, I watched my daughter grow up. In fact, she's in Paris today, on her first international trip. They wouldn't have happened. It would have all been erased. And I don't know what's yet to come, but it's going to be great. So those moments felt like this future couldn't exist, but it very obviously could, because here it is. I'm in it. And there is always a way forward. There is always an answer, no matter how desperate it looks. That's your mind. And your mind is not always going to be honest with you. Sometimes it's going to tell you things that are hard to understand and we can misinterpret them. Right. Sometimes it'll force us into situations because we refuse to take the leap that we need to take, and we'll back out.
Right.
But there is always hope. I'm so very, very thankful that the situations at those 2 moments worked out to where I allowed the room for hope to grow. It was immediately after those 2 moments, very soon after both of them, when things got better.
Right.
So I don't know. I hope that helps. I hope some people can see future for themselves, or at least know that we all go through this.
Yes. Yeah.
That's tough, man. Life's hard.
It is. And I think that one of the things that we as a society have to grasp is that life is hard. And whoever says that it's not, they're just fooling themselves. We have this idea that life is good when it's going right. And, if it's not going right, then life is not good. And we don't understand that life can be great, but it can be hard at the same time. it's like our minds are trying to paint things in a one way or another, but not both existing, kind of like a black and white and not gray. But gray is where most of us live, with the ups and downs, the happy moments, the sad moments, the joy, the pain. It all exists together. And I think as soon as we understand that and can grasp that idea that the negative things aren't the end of the world, they can exist with happy moments too.
I think they have to. They inform. One cannot exist without the other. Just shadows can't exist without sunlight. We know these things. I'll share with you a concept. It's a very short concept that not only helped me with gender issues, which helped ease that part that felt so uncomfortable in a world where you don't feel like you belong, but also helped to understand the good and the bad of life. The concept is life is not binary. Just what you said. It's not black or white. It's not either or. Nature in every aspect is a spectrum. Sometimes it'll be real far over here. Sometimes it'll be real far over here. We spend most of our lives somewhere in the middle of all things. And I mean, this is gender and sexuality, but this is also happiness and sadness. I can be so happy to see my daughter graduate, but sad because her childhood is now over. And we can be really happy because we have great friendships, but maybe, we don't have the career that we want right now. And and things will always be in this weird, I don't think like a left or right spectrum. I think like like the color charts. It's got all the colors and it's like this big, like circle. That's where we are. We're just always somewhere in there. You are probably not ever going to be all the way happy, all the way sad. Most people aren't, this is controversial, all the way straight or all the way gay, and people aren't, even politically, our ideals are, some of what they're saying is okay, but maybe I disagree with 90% of it. You can find that in it's just not the way that the universe works. The universe is an entire singular, like existing thing that requires good and bad at the same time to function. Accepting that makes life a lot easier.
Definitely.
That's what I got, man. I hope in some small way it can help. It can help the world to
Yes,
be
yes,
a better place.
definitely. And I do want to thank you for being so open and so honest, because a lot of people don't want to talk about those things, and there's a stigma about talking openly and honestly. There's even a stigma of for example, I'm a friend that says I love you to my other friends. I just am. I'll just be that person that goes, oh, I just want you to know I love you. And sometimes people are like, oh, okay. But, you know, we need to be more open with that whole idea of talking and speaking about things and not being afraid to talk about things. Because I think, like you were saying, you felt so alone and you wanted to mask everything. But there's a freedom in just letting yourself be and just telling the truth and of who you are, what you are, all these things. It's just there's a truth and there's a power and a freedom. I listen to Pema Chodron, who is a Buddhist nun, a lot, and she has this series where she talks about the freedom to choose something different. And I'm really trying to grasp that because you automatically, your mind automatically does things. It's just out of a habit. It's just an automatic trigger response. But if you can stop and say, wait, before you do that, try and do this differently, you know, try this instead. And just try it and see what happens when you make a different decision. Like you were talking about, you know, I think it's important if we can just start doing that. And maybe this makes us uncomfortable to talk about, but let's just do it anyway, and see what happens. Let's choose something different. And I think the freedom that comes from that is just amazing.
I think you're right. And I want to say that I love that about you. And I think our friendship has been absolutely priceless to me. I've always enjoyed what an open and empathetic and like authentic human you've always seemed to be. And I appreciate that. And thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate you as well. You and your brother, y'all were in my life in a moment of desperation for me. So I think it was we needed each other at that moment for sure.
Absolutely. It's those relationships that get us through these hard moments.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Well, thank you so much, Jason, for coming and sharing with us. And you're welcome back anytime. I know this is definitely going to help people and bring a better understanding into what other people go through on a daily basis and with so many different things. So I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, guys. And I just want to thank you for tuning in today and joining us for this important conversation. And just remember that you do not have to suffer alone.